is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and today I'm bringing you my TBR video for the month of August. Now, in August, I will be participating in one readathon, and that's Tome Topple. Now, this is going to be the 4th round of Tome Topple. I've participated every round. It is hosted, as always, by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes, with a lovely roster of co-hosts. I will link all of the information for the readathon plus the announcement video down below. This readathon runs for 2 weeks. This time around it's going to be from August 4th through August 17th, and that gives you some time to read some big books over 500 pages. There are 5 challenges that are basically almost always the same challenges for the readathon. The first is to read more than 1 tome. This time around, I have 2 I'm planning on reading. The second challenge is to read a graphic novel, and I have placed an interlibrary loan on a graphic novel that's over 500 pages long. I am crossing my fingers that I will get that in time, but I'm not counting it as one of my 2 that I just mentioned right now, because I will honestly be very, very impressed if my library manages to find a copy of this for me at all, much less in the next 2 weeks. If it's getting towards the end of the readathon and it doesn't look like that's going to come in at my library, I may or may not run out and buy or borrow something else that's a graphic novel over 500 pages. But that's a bridge that I'll cross when I come to it, and that's going to depend entirely on how far I get, how quickly on the 2 books that I have already chosen. The third challenge is to read a tome that's part of a series, and for this I have Strange the Dreamer by Laini. This is the first book in a planned duology. The second book isn't out yet. But this is a new 2017 release that I very much want to read before the second book comes out. This is young adult fantasy. It's 530 pages, I think. 532 pages. If you'll remember, this is one of the books that I haven't yet gotten to on my list of top 5 want-to-read SFF books that I did a few months ago as part of the booktube SFF Babbles. Those were all books that I wanted to get to by the end of this calendar year, so this will be progress towards that. Challenge 4 is to buddy read a tome. I don't have plans for this yet. The last couple rounds of Tome Topple I've sort of made like half-hearted social media attempts to connect with people, and it's sort of fallen flat. But if you would like to buddy read with me either of the books that I've chosen for this readathon, please let me know. And challenge 5 is to read an adult novel, and for this I have The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt from the library. So, as I'm sure you're aware, this was like the big popular literary fiction book from like a couple years or so ago. And at the time that everyone was reading this, a couple people who are friends and acquaintances of mine who don't necessarily know what I read most of the time told me that I specifically really needed to read this book. So I added it to my TBR. And it's been making my way up to the top of my library TBR, and now it's at the top. And now I sort of just have to read it or give up on it, and so Tome Topple is going to be my I'm going to read The Goldfinch, even though I don't particularly want to, time for me this time around. And who knows, this could surprise me by getting me totally invested in a literary fiction novel. That hasn't happened to me in several years, but it could happen. I believe this has to do with art in some way, so that's a thing in its favor where I'm concerned. I want to point out, though, that while these 2 books look like they're the same size, this one is like 200 pages longer and it feels like twice as heavy. So that's the chunker for this readathon. So these are the books I'm planning on reading for Tome Topple. Possibly a graphic novel as well if my library obliges. Now I'm going to tell you what I am currently reading that I would like to wrap up in the next few days. It would be ideal if I finished these before Tome Topple started on the 4th. It's probably not going to happen. These are probably going to bleed over for me. I'm going to have to keep reading them while I'm starting in on my readathon books, but that's just how life's gonna be. So last month I mentioned that I was going to participate in Katie from Katie Loves to Read's Goodreads read-along of Tigana by Guy Gavriel Kay. I said that I was going to be reading this bit by bit throughout the month. I made it most of the way through, but I've still got this much left, so I'm hoping to finish this up here at the beginning of the month as soon as possible. And then the other thing I'm reading right now is on my Kindle, and that is a NetGalley ARC. This is a young adult fantasy novel called Girls Made of Snow and Glass by Melissa Bashardoust. And this is I believe it's a debut novel, and it is a retelling of Snow White that is supposed to have some queer representation of some sort in it, though I'm not far enough along in it to tell. But so far it seems to be a really imaginative take on the fairy tale, and I haven't read a ton of YA fantasy in the last few months, and it feels really good to be back in it. So those were what I'm reading currently, and then I have just a lot of stuff that I would like to get through sometime soon, and we'll just see how much of this I get to this month. The first thing I have that I've mentioned on this channel before that I haven't gotten to is ODY-C Cycle 1, which I believe is a compilation of volumes 1 and 2. This I did not get to during the Getting Graphic readathon, and I did not get to it again during Book2athon. So this is a high priority for me early in the month, hopefully, because I would like to get this back to the library. The other book that I have that I'd like to get through by the end of the month that I've announced that I was going to read for previous readathons and then not gotten to was Passing Strange by Klages. This is one of the Tor.com novellas, 1940s San Francisco with a hint of magic, I believe. And then I do have one interlibrary loan out from the library right now, so this is another thing that I'll probably be reading during the weeks of Tome Topple that isn't for the Tome Topple readathon. My library puts these things on your interlibrary loans, so you're not seeing the cover here, but this is Fairytale in the Ancient World by Graham Anderson. This is nonfiction. It has been a really long time since I have read any nonfiction. This is one of the current group reads for the Goodreads group Into the Forest that I'm a member of that talks about fairy tale and mythology-based books. The current read-along theme for these couple months here is books that have been nominated for the Mythopoeic Award, and those awards award both fiction and nonfiction, so we have both fiction read-alongs going on and a nonfiction read-along. And I've read both of the fiction books. I may reread them if the mood strikes me, but they're both books that I read and loved and gave 5 stars to. The adult book is In the Night Garden by Catherine Ann Valenti, and the kids or young adult book is When the Sea Turned to Silver by Grace Lynn, and I adored both of those books, but I've already read them. And then this is the nonfiction pick. And this is going to be, you know, academic, scholarly type writing, but it's a subject I'm really interested in. This is, I think the premise of this is that fairy tale themes and story elements can be traced back to ancient mythology from various cultures, and I think it traces various story elements between fairy tales we know and myths that we know that we might not otherwise think to connect. So, under the wild assumption that I read all of those in like approximately the first half of the month, I'll still have some time at the end of the month. Somehow, I doubt it's going to quite work that way, but that's how it's planning out in my mind. But I still really need to read The Secret Keeper by Kate Morton because this is my mom's book and I need to get it back to her. I've mentioned this for months now and I still haven't read it. I then have 2 more books that I have on my horizon for the near future. If I don't get to these in August, they'll be first priorities in September. The first is Steeplejack by A.J. Hartley. I have this out from the library. It's a young adult fantasy mystery book, and it's the first in a series that I have not seen any hype for whatsoever, but that I'm really intrigued by. And then I also have His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik, which I've been meaning to read like all year, and it hasn't happened yet, but I dearly want to read this book. This is the first in the Temeraire series, which recently concluded with the final volume, and I want to know if I should start collecting the rest of these books, because I want to know if this is a series I'm going to want to read the rest of or not. So that's what I'm hoping to read in the month of August. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if they sound interesting to you. Let me know if you're participating in Tome Topple, if you want to buddy read a book with me. Anyhow, I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.